Hi guys, I hope you all are doing well and are safe during this time. I know it's definitely been an adjustment for me, so I hope you guys are all adjusted by now. As you can see, have my presentation here. It is on Hosea 3, 1 through 5, and I'll just get started by reading that for you. So it says, "The Lord said to me again, 'Go, love a woman who has a lover and is an adulteress, just as the Lord loves the people of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes.' So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer of barley and a measure of wine. And I said to her, 'You must remain as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore, you shall not have intercourse with a man, nor I with you. For the Israelites shall remain many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward, the Israelites shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king. They shall come in awe to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days." So just kind of as an introduction, surprise, not. It's definitely no surprise that Israel is an idolatrous nation. Just read any of the instances in the Old Testament. There's definitely not enough space to list them here, but there are many. Of course, there are judges and prophets sent to warn them of their idolatry, and Hosea is no exception. Hosea is alive during the reigns of kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Jeroboam. The thesis that I came up with was Hosea follows the narrative throughout the story of the text, and through his own life story shows that although Israel falls away from God and will be judged because of that, God will bring restoration to the people of Israel and repair the broken relationship between them and him. This is communicated through the immediate literary context, the symbolism from the narrative of Hosea's marriage and children, and the study of the use of the words love throughout Hosea 3, 1 through 5, and whoredom in chapters 1 and 4. So going to the immediate literary context, in Hosea 1, 1 through 2, God commands Hosea to go and marry a woman of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom for forsaking the Lord. And so in this process, he goes and marries a woman named Gomer, and after he goes and marries her, it talks about their 3 children, Jezreel, Lo-ruhamah, and Lo-ami. After painting this picture of judgment for Israel, in chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, it talks about God restoring Israel. Then kind of after that, Hosea 2 goes into detail about judging Gomer, Hosea's wife, and Israel. God will strip them naked and bring them into the wilderness to remind them of how God brought them out of Egypt. And then, of course, there's chapter 3, which I just kind of read to you, where God commands Hosea again to go and love a woman who has a lover and is an adulteress, just as the Lord loves the people of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love raisin cakes. So this is kind of just reiterating what God had commanded him, but also commanding it a second time. And then in Hosea 4, God accuses Israel of their idolatry. Verse 12 in this chapter says, "My people consult a piece of wood, and their divining rod gives them oracles. For a spirit of whoredom has led them astray. They have played the whore, forsaking their God." Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are connected because they are a part of the same overarching story. And chapter 4 is the transition text into God accusing Israel of their falling away from him. Just also kind of a side note, I wanted to touch on this whole idea of whoredom that is talked about in chapters 1 and 4. So when God is using the term whoredom, it's not in terms of somebody being idolatrous like cheating. It's it's more that Israel is in a sense cheating on God by playing the whore and going to other gods instead of worshiping him. And so kind of looking at that, it shows that Gomer is is Israel in this overarching story, and it kind of shows through chapters 1, 2, and 3 kind of how this story comes to fruition. And then chapter 4, like I said before, it transitions into God actually accusing Israel. But we know that they will be restored and reconciled to God in the end. So it does end on a good note, at least. So the next point I want to touch on is the symbolism of Hosea's marriage and children. So the command God gave Hosea in chapter 1 to marry an adulteress links back to Gomer, the woman he marries and has children with. So as I said, Gomer symbolizes Israel in the narrative, and their children all have symbols as well. So Jezreel symbolizes the coming judgment on Israel. Lo Ruhamah symbolizes that God will no longer have mercy on or forgive the northern kingdom of Israel, but will have mercy for the southern kingdom of Judah. And then Lo Ami symbolizes that the people of Israel are not God's people. Oops, sorry. Let me go back there. So the word studies that, well, I ended up just doing the word love, and it is, the word love in this text is called ahab. It's a primitive root. I did only look at the Greek, for this one, but it means men's love for each other, objects, and God. And it can also mean God's love for man individually, for the people of Israel, and righteousness. So it is used many, many times throughout the pericope, and it is also used in this type of context 169 times in the Bible. It is used in the Genesis story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. It talked about how Ahab loves Leah just as he loves Rachel. And also it is used in Deuteronomy 7. If Ahab loves God and keeps his commands, God will Ahab love and bless them. So in order for Hosea to fulfill God's command to him, he must love Gomer as he loves Israel. And so just kind of going more in depth with that, it is a very significant part of this pericope, the fact that the chapters before kind of create this entire overarching story of how God accuses, judges, and then restores Israel. And yes, this is a common theme kind of throughout the entire Old Testament, but I found that it was very, very interesting that that God used Hosea's actual life as this example to Israel about how he loves them even though they turn away from him and they love other gods and they don't worship him the way that he wants them to. And so I really loved this text. I was glad that I was assigned it because it gave me a really nice picture of God's love and how it transcends anything that we could possibly understand, in terms of just how much God is willing to forgive in terms of us still turning consistently over and over to other things. So I I really, really loved this text personally. And so just kind of as a conclusion, as I've said, chapters 1, 2, and 3 are a part of this overarching story meant to symbolically communicate God's accusation, judgment, and restoration of Israel. And I do want to say it is possible that there is another translation to this text. I did find one or two in my research of commentaries, but just looking at it and reading through it and doing the research that I did, it seems that this way is the best way to translate it. And so just for a minute, I'm going to exit and actually go over to my exegesis paper because I want to read you my practical application part, and I found that it wasn't easy for me to put this into the presentation. So I wanted to make sure that I got this part. So I'll just kind of read it out loud to you. When looking at this text, it is clear that the message is when we stray away from God, we will be judged and then restored. But there is so much more to it than that. In today's society and culture, as everyone knows, technology and social media have created new ways for us to distract ourselves from God all day long. It has been that way for a while with technology. But more recently with social media, we have fallen into the trap of thinking that the way to entertain ourselves or spend our free time is to always be doing something on our phones, computers, iPads, tablets, you name it. And that takes away time from face-to-face interaction. It changes the way we develop relationships, and most importantly, in my opinion, it takes away from God. I'm not going to pretend that I do not do this as well, because I do, especially more recently. As people know, I have chronic illnesses. I'm in the midst of beginning to plan for my wedding. I'm taking 21 credit hours worth of classes and working 2 jobs. Now, I am not complaining I did this to myself, but I am noticing that when I have free time, I tend to just sit in my bed and watch something on Netflix. A part of the reason why is because I am exhausted and chronically fatigued to some extent every day. But why I really do it is to turn off the thinking part of my brain. To just go numb for a little while so I can deal with the amount of stress I sometimes have with everything going on personally and in school. I know I'm not the only one who does this. The younger generation especially does this. We all seek to turn off our brains and just go numb for a while to cope with different things that are going on in our lives. This is adultery. We turn to social media or our phones for comfort when we are in stressful situations because it gives us an escape from the real world that older adults are always telling the younger people about. There's no transition into the real world. We are already in it. And people need to learn how to deal with challenges and persecutions, which God has said it will happen if we follow Him, in a way that is emotionally, physically, and spiritually healthy. Because if we do not, we are going to burn ourselves out at whatever job or career we decide to take. Something that would be interesting to try would be to go and pray or journal or read scripture every time we felt overwhelmed by the things of this life that God promises will pass away when Jesus comes back. I'm going to be frank. We are still just as idolatrous, if not more, than the people of Israel in the Old Testament. There are so many things that seek to pull us away from God and occupy our attention. It is important that we stop and think about how the younger generation, our generation, is being impacted by these gods and how we can seek to keep ourselves from becoming ensnared like the rest of the world. Excuse me. Just needed a drink of water. I mentioned a few of these, but practicing spiritual disciplines has helped me start going to God when I am troubled or exhausted and I feel like I cannot go on.